Could Skynet make better retro? All this and more on This Week in Retro.
High-resolution color graphics.
This land of high technology.
The revolution in technology that made the information age possible.
Those kids are not afraid of computers.
Could AI remaster retro games?
Tiny Combat Arena.
Completed it, mate.
All this and more coming up on today's show.
Up-to-date news for out-of-date tech.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's show. For those watching on video, you may well notice we have 4 faces instead of 3 this week because we are joined by our guest, James Bradley. James, thank you for joining us today.
Hello, guys. Pleasure to be here. Big fan.
Thank you, and we'll get to know James a little bit better and why he's here shortly. But let's start with you, Chris. How's your week been this week?
Yeah, not too bad. I bought one of these wonderful SCART to HDMI converters that I know Dave is very fond of and thinks they're awesome. So haven't had enough time to play with it properly yet, but there will be a full reveal as to how good or not it may be at some point. But yeah, that's the main thing I've been doing.
What are you hoping to hook up to that?
Just an extra way of, in case I need something to get a semi-decent RGB signal into one of the many flat-screen TVs I have around me on this desk, then it's another way of getting a signal onto the screen, basically. Nothing more convoluted than that. So, yeah.
Options. Always good to have options for retro. Dave, how's your week been? And by the way, I should say a big happy birthday to Dave. It's actually today, so happy birthday, Dave.
Thank you very much.
Happy birthday.
And how are you celebrating?
And making another year. I'm all right. I'm slowly starting to get a little bit better. Not being well. I'm going to the hospital for x-rays and stuff. But that's slowly leaving me. I've been sucked into playing XCOM this week. I haven't left the computer for days. I'm completely addicted to a DLC I didn't realize existed that completely changed XCOM 2, so that's me. Other than that, I have had a gift from Rich, who Chris made the game for. He has sent me a stuffed dinosaur, which will now sit on the shelf behind me.
There you go. That's a nice birthday present. Thank you, Rich. That's always he's always such a thoughtful chap, isn't he? Rich.
He is.
Yeah.
So that's nice. Good. And then there's this James guy who's appeared on the show here. Now, for those who'd like to know who James is, I got to know James when the cave moved to the mill, to the new location. And I got this email from this chap going, I like retro. And I happen to have launched a couple of Kickstarters in the past using Commodore Amigas. And, oh, by the way, you're about a 30-second walk down the road from me now. Can I come and say hello?
Oh.
It was really weird, wasn't it?
It was so
we got to know each other. Yeah, and James has been a huge help in helping to run the cave in more recent months, getting flyers out to the local area. Yeah, he's been great. Like however, checking out the flyers. Now, I mentioned that he's done 2 Kickstarters in the past, and you're now working on a third, which is actually live, and it involves Amigas yet again. Why don't you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, so this game is I create games that kind of have a storyline connection to all of them. So the first game I did was Civitas Nihilium, which is this one here, which is a solo player game for one player, obviously, but it's a card game. And I did the pixel art using D-Paint. And it has a play alongside soundtrack that I used, Soundtracker Pro and a little bit of Music X, because I was learning the two at the time. And this is the soundtrack for that. So it's basically a game built by the Commodore Amiga A1200. And I always wanted to crack coding, and I never cracked it. I wanted to crack assembly. I got a little bit into Amos, but never got round to it. And I just thought, well, I've got a little bit of graphic design thing. I'll try and learn as much as I can about D-Paint. And my goodness, like the fact that it's like, 30, 40 years old, D-Paint 5, I guess, like it is such a powerful tool. And I love using it. And it was wonderful being in the cave with Stu Cambridge when he came to visit and just seeing all the kind of power that he was able to get out of D-Paint as well. And that's really, really helped with this new Kickstarter, which I'm doing, which is a cyberpunk city builder called Civitas 2230. And it's a big box game. It's great.
Is that a
Multiplayer.
prototype you're holding up there? Is that the final product?
This is the prototype, but it's very close to the final game. It's got a nice linen texture on there, which works really well with pixel art. The Kickstarter is currently live. You can search for it on Kickstarter, Civitas 2230. We're about 50% funded so far with about 20 days to go. Things are looking good. But these games always separate the board gaming community because they're always like, oh, not pixel art. Oh, why did you do that? And I'm like, well, it's authentic pixel art. And then they're like, why did you make it on an Amiga? That must be so slow. And I'm like, actually, it's pretty fast. Like, it's just one of those things. So the retro community tend to be the best audience for this because, of course, you're buying a game, you're getting the cellophane off, you're sniffing the manual, you're getting a nostalgic hit that you don't really get anymore unless you're buying these Kickstarter games that are being made, which are like, I've got quite a lot these days actually, but not many doing big boxes. And the board game nostalgia hit kind of comes between the two, sort of, they cross over quite nicely, I think. So if you want a nostalgic hit, back the game.
Nice.
This new game that you're making, the previous one was a solo game. This one's multiplayer, isn't it?
Yeah, this one's multiplayer. Yeah, up to 4 players. If we go through our what are they called? I always forget what they're called. Stretch goals. Yeah, you can get up to 5 players or 6 players because there's obviously extra bits that need to be added. But anyone that comes on board might have a chance to win one of these Sony Walkmans, which I've got.
Oh, nice. So James is just holding up some original Sony Walkmans. They're not some kind of replica, are they?
No, these are original Sony Walkmans. They've had their belts replaced, so they've been proper refurbished. They work really well. Circa 1987, they're WM33s. WM33/43. Yeah, they're super cool. They have equalizers on the front. They're lovely. Really cool.
Do they come with nice orange foam headphones as well?
Oh, you know it. Just over there. They're super cool. I nearly tried to get them to work on this, but I couldn't get them working on this one. I was going to have them on, but it's great.
That would have been cool.
Fantastic. Good. Well, we will put a link to the Kickstarter in the show notes, so do go and check it out. If you like city building board games with pixel art, authentic pixel art made in D-Paint and music, because it's like a background tune that you can put on your phone or your Walkman if you've won it.
Yeah,
and you can just sort of listen to while you're playing the board game to set an atmosphere and really kind of sit down, set the tone, and just dedicate an evening. Tonight, guys, we're going to play board games, and we're going to get the pizza in, we're going to have the soundtrack on, and we're really going to get into this. Oh, I love that kind of thing. And you did some playtesting in the cave as well, which I wasn't available for. Kicking myself.
I know. It's a real shame.
Hopefully, we'll get a game soon.
Yeah, it was a lovely evening. Those tables are perfect for it. It worked great.
Good.
There's definitely a crossover between retro gaming and board games. There are quite a few people that are friends of the cave that I know are into board games.
Oh, great.
For sure.
Great. Well, hopefully they'll come back the project.
Hello, Gary, if you're watching. I know Gary is a huge... I know, and Pillock, So let's get into this week's stories. And James will be joining us throughout because he has just shared with us his retro credentials as a D-Paint guru and Pro Tracker master. So hopefully we have some good opinions to share. Let's get into our first story. Our first story this week is all about AI and, the implications of it. So, guys, just a quick question for you. First of all, have you seen these various AI image generation tools that have been popping up everywhere lately? And have you tried them?
Yes, they freak me out.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dave?
Yeah, they're everywhere. They're, on Discord, it's been spammed for weeks and weeks and weeks. These things coming out, they're absolutely fascinating, though.
They are fascinating. So some examples of this technology are one called DALL-E, one called Midjourney, which is the one that's on Discord, which has become very popular lately.
Yeah.
And there are others out there. So how it works is you type in some text describing what you want to see. So, for example, I might type in an astronaut riding a horse on a rainbow. And then you might want to add a style to that. So I might say Studio Ghibli or hyper-realistic style. And then this incredible thing happens. It takes a minute or so to generate, but an image appears before your eyes, created by a deep learning AI system. And if you're watching the video, I've actually pasted into the show notes for Duncan a clip of an astronaut riding a horse on a rainbow. And I used photorealistic, although what you do is you kind of generate the image and then you can drill down and down and down using these tools to make them more and more and more realistic. So this is the first pass. Not bad. Not bad. There's an astronaut in outer space with a rainbow on his horse, looking good.
Bizarre helmet. The helmet kind of goes.
Yeah, a bit of an odd helmet.
Yeah.
But
Still talking about the
astronaut. And this discussion, this story today has been prompted by an article submitted by Mark Central. The article is on Ars Technica, and it talks about the arrival of this technology and considers its uses and some of the ethics behind using it. So a few years back, we heard about deep fakes and how that might cause problems for society. Well, I think this probably has the potential to shake things up even more. And it really does feel like a huge leap in what we can do with a computer with minimal knowledge on how it works behind the scenes, because many people won't even know how this system works or how to access it, but they certainly have been exposed to it in Discord, on their social media feeds, all over their Facebook feeds. They will have seen images like this, not knowing where they've come from. So, guys, you said you've used these systems. Can you give me any examples of the things you've tried to create, or what was the first thing you typed in? Chris?
Oh
God.
Well, don't start with me, because basically I tried it for about 10 minutes when everybody was all over it on Discord. I can't even remember what I typed, but I remember being gobsmacked that it actually came up with a fairly decent representation of whatever the top subject matter was. Tried a couple, but I can't remember what it was I typed or what the images looked like, only that it worked, and that freaked me out. Yeah. Dave?
For some reason, I wanted to see dinosaurs in space, so I put that in, and it was surprisingly good. It came out with some stuff that was actually quite thought-provoking, and it came out with stuff that looked quite lonely. A dinosaur, and I followed that and then went down a lonely dinosaur, the last dinosaur alive, and that kind of thing, and it kept coming out with more images down this deep hole of depression that I went on.
That's a really sad story. James, what have you been doing with it?
So we installed Midjourney into our Discord for the board game's got a little Discord, and we installed it in there and got everybody having a little go on it. And of course, it's all like, show me a cyberpunk eye, show me a cyberpunk thing. It's really good coming up with cyberpunk imagery, but I've tried it with like 8-bit, 16-bit pixel art, and I guess because it sources the internet for inspiration, all of these images are fairly low res, so it comes up quite crap, to be honest with you. It's not particularly good when it comes to pixel art, which is a shame.
You're still in a job then. Well, it's a shame. Exactly. But on the other hand, it keeps you in a job. Yeah. So actually, I was really impressed with the results, but Duncan and I did manage to confuse it last week, because one of the stories on last week's show was the war on floppy disks. So we tried to use AI to generate a thumbnail of an exploding floppy disk, and the AI just could not figure out how to draw a floppy disk. Yeah. Ironically, a computer couldn't figure out a floppy disk. We got all kinds of things. We got something that looked like a cassette tape with half a floppy disk inside it. It was all sorts of weird stuff going on.
Yeah.
And I guess it probably comes back to the same as what you're saying. It has to have enough. It has to have learned enough, and maybe there must be a lot of floppy disk images, but I don't know. Maybe it's declared its own war on floppy disks. I don't know. But what we have learned through this Ars Technica article is that it can handle retro. There has to be a retro angle for the sake of being on this show. And in the article, it shows examples of Duke Nukem, Monkey Island, King's Quest, and Star Control characters being turned from their original pixel art into real-looking people. So this is another method you can use with this AI now. You can use a source image and describe how you want it to be enhanced, what kind of result you want. And it will spit it out. So in this case, they've asked for photorealistic images of these pixel art avatars, characters, portraits. And the results are just astonishing. They look like real photos of people, I guess, cosplaying these characters. It could have come from any retro Comic-Con or anything like that. They're fantastic. Lots more to discuss on this article, but let's get to a few more of your opinions. Dave, what are your thoughts on the article?
So, on the idea of AI created art and games, I'm mixed on it. The results, as you said, for the 4 examples in this article are incredible. I mean, it really incredibly good. It's 4 games that I do know. So it's images that I did know, and I feel what they produced is what the characters look like. So it's not even taking them a different direction. This is really what the characters really look like. and there's potential here to create anything we want to do from, we can use as a base point from an old game. We can create something photorealistic by the looks here. I do have a misgiving though, and I've noticed this particularly about films with lots of CGI in it. We still can't get CGI right. We still in that kind of uncanny valley area where you can tell it's not a real person when they use CGI. And until they can get CGI exactly right so that you really can't tell, then I don't think photorealistic is going to convince you all the way. I know they can do lots of things to help. You've probably seen pictures of actors in these kind of green spandex suits with little dots all over them to capture the motion, and that really does help. If you look at, I think Lord of the Rings did that with Gollum, and that's why Gollum in Lord of the Rings looks so good, but it's still not quite right. And I think if it's not quite right, then your brain rejects it. So perhaps we're better off with graphics that are not intended to look realistic, and then your brain does the hard work for you, fills in the gaps.
I think we're moving into the realms there of moving images. That's where the magic can be lost. But some of the photorealistic static images that this AI kicks out is incredibly convincing. It really is. The way that this all works, the article says, is not through a system of actually understanding what the images are. The system has access to 5 billion images on the internet to train itself with. But it does this through a process called stable diffusion. Now, I'm not going to pretend to understand completely how this works, but apparently it learns to recognize familiar shapes in the noise of the pixels in the image, the shapes that make up the image. And you can kind of see this when you request an image and it's generating it. It slowly comes more and more into focus based on the words that you've prompted it to give you. It's quite a fascinating thing to see evolve, the image that you've asked for. Now, the training, the article says, can cost in the region of $600,000 and require many powerful GPUs. But then once it's done that training, it creates what's called a weights file. So it compresses all the information it's learning to a weights file of about 4.2 gigabytes. So, about the size of a DVD. That's about DVD size, isn't it? 4.2 gigs, about right. So, on a DVD, you've effectively got the AI's brain that you can tap into, the source, the seed of the images, I guess. James, what uses have you found for this?
My day job is indie film, and the indie film side of things, I think this is going to open up a lot of opportunity for indie filmmakers, because what you were mentioning just now about Andy Serkis and the ping pong balls all over his body, that's an expensive process. You've got to obviously pay for actors that are incredibly good at movement. You have to pay for all these different people to do that sort of stuff, and the cameras everywhere. It's all very expensive. So the barrier for entry for science fiction indie-based content has always been, you need at least $100,000 to make this work. Now I think if we start moving towards that, especially if we're doing things like still images for indie band, there are album artwork, stuff like that. For the indie people, I think it will be really good for them. But I think that it's for you, like you were saying, Neil, you can tell when it's not quite right, and it doesn't feel. There does seem like the people do tend to have a soul missing or something. I can't quite put my finger on it, but there's something missing there. But certainly for barrier of entry and for the low budget indie stuff, I think this is going to be quite a successful tool for them.
I like the idea of music albums with AI generated art.
Yeah.
That's got a lot of scope for that, for sure. Now, the article also discusses ethical concerns. Yes, Dave, you're putting your hand up.
I want to go off on just a little bit of a tangent here. I mentioned something about an uncanny valley, which is this phrase that describes something that that's supposed to look human but doesn't quite look human. If you see a mannequin that looks creepy, so on.
Yeah.
Yeah. I read some tweet somewhere that said, if there's an evolutionary need for us to spot uncanny valley, in other words, things impersonating humans that aren't, then what was that evolutionary need? Anyway, there's a thought to stop you sleeping at night.
Different homo types, I guess. Homo sapiens, that kind of thing. Homo erectus, I don't know, something like that maybe.
Yeah, interesting question.
It's a rabbit hole, isn't it?
It is.
I'm not saying it's aliens. I'm not saying it's aliens. But maybe it was aliens.
It's aliens. Ancient
aliens.
aliens.
Yeah. So the article also goes into ethical concerns. So on all of these services that we can access that are hosted for us, the not safe for work filters are all on as standard. Although some of these systems are available as open source, so you can set up your own server and you can remove those filters. And then, if you start incorporating real celebrities into these images, we're going back in the direction of that deep fake rabbit hole that we were all warned about and the problems that you can cause with it. So, I think it's a good thing to have those filters turned on, but it sounds like it's very easy to circumvent them. Also, though, it learns from images on the internet, and it's learned from many artists that are alive today. So the system is capable of producing incredible images that look just like famous artists in style. And quite a few artists have raised that this is a concern of them. Can you copyright a style? An artist will create an image and put it out there, and of course the copyright belongs to them. But can you copyright a style? If I started making art in the style of H.R. Geiger, but I didn't copy his art, I just did it in that style, could I be sued? If I didn't use his name? I don't know. So can this AI... where's the line? I think it's probably more of an ethical than a legal question there. But I don't see this stopping anytime soon. It's just such a powerful tool. Chris, your thoughts on this? We haven't heard from you.
Yeah, no, I like how you started talking about removal of not safe for work filters and then handed over to me. That was very well done. But no, you've raised some really good points, and especially even on the copyright. I mean, as I've said before, when I played with this, and it was only briefly, it actually freaked me out. The fact that it could do it. I've always held that AI is going to go so far, but a computer can't do something like paint a picture, for example. Well, guess what? Now it can, and that is a massive step in my view. Ignoring the not safe for work stuff at the moment, copyright, surely that has to come to a fore, because if this is learning from images online, is there like an automated copyright implication there whereby it's essentially stealing images? Is it stealing people's faces to come up with these new images, that kind of thing? So yeah, that's an interesting side to it. But reusing, about using this to upscale retro game graphics, which is sort of what we were talking about at the start. I like playing retro games with retro graphics, so I don't see any use there for myself personally as a recipient of games that may be created in that way. And interestingly, retro graphics or pixel art is in vogue. So, games like Slipstream and Cruel wouldn't be the same without pixel art. So you have this new generation of players and developers appreciating that genre. So, yeah, Dave, you wanted to jump in there?
I've just had a thought. If you think back to 8-bit, 16-bit, 32-bit games where it was pixel art in it, think back to the adverts and think back to the game boxes. It wasn't pixel art on those. It was photorealistic images and that. So maybe that's what it could be used for there to produce. Yeah. I mean, even if you think of Monkey Island, it wasn't 8-bit graphics in the front of Monkey Island. It was a drawn picture on it. So maybe that's what it could do.
Yeah,
it was sort of a cartoony. Oh, sorry, go on, James.
No. I was just thinking of the Missile Command box for the Atari 2600. Just all those different images with the guy with the helmet on. That could totally be an AI image.
Yeah.
There is talk of this technology creating video and other things in future. Dave's raised his concerns on that, and I agree with them, I have to say. But it has got me thinking, not only could this be wonderful movies, it could be really great at remastering retro games, which Chris touched on. And also AI could be really useful in helping modern AAA games get their costs down, because if you could just type in, give me a 50-mile square island with jungle on it, 3 cities, and an Aztec pyramid in the middle of it, and just let the AI create that for you, a few lines of code could eliminate the need for a massive team and help us to actually take advantage of the ever increasing, exponentially increasing power of modern consoles that need exponentially increasing team sizes to actually get the most out of them. So I think this could be a real benefit used in the right ways. who knows? Maybe you could even describe a feature film in a few lines and then sit down and watch it. I can't believe
I've seen those
cancelled
films
my
already.
favorite series. They've cancelled my favorite series. Make me series 5 of whatever. Make me series 8 of Cobra Kai. So there we go. Hopefully we won't need to send Chris back in time to assassinate its creator with a sniper when this all gets out of hand and the robots rise up. But I'm impressed with it. And I don't know. There's also, as Dave touched on, there's sort of an eeriness about it. It's like the science fiction future has arrived that we all imagined. And then suddenly it feels a bit too real, doesn't it? It feels a bit too much like we're losing control in some areas. I don't know. But there we go. Something to ponder. A happy ending to that story to think about.
Tiny Combat Arena is a project I've been watching with keen eyes for a while now. For those that have been living in a bunker, Tiny Combat Arena is a combat flight simulator made in the same vein as those in the 90s, but for modern PCs. In the words of Microprose, who are the developers, the current version of Microprose anyway, Tiny Combat Arena is a labour of love combat flight simulator that aims to strike the perfect balance between a simulator and an approachable, customisable air combat experience, all executed in a stylised look representing a fictional Cold War era conflict. So, basically, it's not an arcade shooter. It's a lot more highbrow than that. But it's not DCS or MS Flight Sim 2020 either. So you won't need to sit on the toilet for 6 months studying a manual for each aircraft like you may do for some of the other flight sims. And it's that flat shade. I'm sure we all did that back in the day, didn't we? Not for 6 months, but I remember anyway. But it's that. It also has that flat shade polygon graphics style that we grew up with in the 80s and 90s. The early access version, which is the version available at the moment, has one playable aircraft, which is the Harrier. Neil, I was going to say, have you taken a look? But I think that's a silly question. So what do you think of it, Neil?
Well, before we get onto this, Microprose, or whoever from Microprose is listening to our show, where is my B-17 Flying Fortress remake, please? You promised it years ago. Every time Microprose comes up on the show, I have to ask you, where the hell has it gone? Because I'm so psyched for that game, and they've just gone completely silent on it. For those who haven't heard me rant about it before, it's a remake of B-17 Flying Fortress, which then had a sequel in the early 2000s. But Microprose, when they came back in their latest iteration, promised us a full VR online team play experience where you and your friends could all sit in the bomber in a different seat in each part and go on missions together. And now they've gone silent. It's like the game I've always wanted. So anyway, Microprose, sort it out. So anyway, yes, Tiny Arena Combat. I first played this about 3 months back. It felt very early access. Felt quite actiony. I quite liked just going into the free flight and just flying around. It's quite nice because you're in a jump jet. You can adjust the angle of the thrust, so you can do the hover thing, take out a few buildings, gently fly away and get your speed up again. That's a lot of fun, and landing. So I did have fun with it. I do like the graphical style of it. Because it's texture free, you can scale it up pretty much to anything you want. So you can play this thing in 4K, and it looks like, if you think back to when you used to watch the Krypton Factor and these multi-million-pound flight simulators back in the 80s, it looks like one of them, and it's got a super smooth frame rate as well. So it's got that going for it, which I really like. But yeah, I can only criticize it so much or praise it so much because it is very much early access, and a lot can change between now and when it comes out. But if you're interested in this kind of retro-looking flight sim, I would urge you all to go and have a look at another game called Thunder Helix by David Walters. To see this, go on Twitter and look up the user at Hidden Asbestos. And you'll see the development of a really beautiful looking, well, I guess the style is very similar to this, albeit created by one man, by David, not a whole team. And he's made a really nice looking, I guess, LHX attack chopper or Gunship 2000 style game. And it's coming along really well, and it makes me really excited. And he does regular updates on his Twitter about what he's been working on lately and what new models he's made and all the adjustments and game progress. So go and check that out as well. And it looks like it's going to have a lot more depth than this tiny arena combat. But they're different types of games. That's fine.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to see the Harrier getting some love. I used to be in the Fleet Air Arm. I was in the Royal Navy for 4.5 years as a aircraft engineer. So I'm a massive. I love flight sims. I've always loved them. Gunship 2000 is one of my favorite games of all time. Love it. But yeah, seeing the Harrier here, like, wow, bringing the Harrier back and putting it on into people's computer games, like, fantastic. Kind of scares me a little bit that they're bringing in a sort of one aircraft. It does sort of feel like they're going to be to get the F-14 Tomcat. You need to spend $600 and all that sort of stuff. So I'm worried that the DLC will be there. But yeah, it's great that I love the polygon look. I'm sure that, like Neil said, it's going to aid with the frame rate. That's wicked. I actually love sitting on the toilet and reading big manuals, so not necessarily for me. in that light sim thing, I'm not really. I just love that whole process of getting to learn about the aircraft, knowing what makes things work, how things tick, and that's kind of why I play those types of games. So for me, I'll give it a look, but I'm not necessarily sold on it. Yeah. Dogfights for dogfights reasons, just seems there needs to be a bit of depth, some story and stuff as well.
Just going back to manuals and the Thunder Helix that I mentioned, I did drop a cheeky message to David a couple of months back and said, you don't need to make a decision, but if you ever feel like you want to do a big box release of this game and you ever want my help with it, I would love to put together the big box, the manual, the maps, the keyboard overlay. I would love to help you do that. So,
that would be fantastic.
He is a man who, as I say, he's developed the game by himself, and I'm sure he'd love to do all that side of things himself as well. He's a very talented guy, but I would love the opportunity to do something like that. Dave?
So sick.
I'm just thinking now that with James' experience of doing Kickstarters for box games and your experience in ironing games with your retroplating, but also you are looking into creating a telescoping box, I believe, at some point, then you really could make this happen. It's actually a reality rather than just a, hey, why don't you do this? You could really do this.
That would be fantastic.
Yeah, I would love the opportunity, but that's certainly not my decision to make. And however David does decide to release this, it's going to be fantastic, and I will be a day one buyer of it. Yeah,
that would be very cool. I'm a big fan of the box and the contents and all of that. And one of the few weeks I didn't grab a prop, but I've got 3 or 4 Microprose simulators up there, and it's the box, it's the maps, it's the keyboard overlay, everything you've just mentioned. It just makes it so special. But this particular game, getting back to Tiny Combat Arena, it really, the look and feel, and I must confess, I haven't bothered paying for it yet. We'll get to that a little bit later on. So all I've got to go on is what I can see on the videos that are available. But it does remind me of things like F-18, which everybody talks about F-18 when we mention flight simulators specifically on the Amiga, because it felt like a simulator. It felt complicated, but actually it was quite simple and therefore enjoyable. It wasn't a hard game to master. So it definitely reminds me of that. Little bit of Falcon, only in look and feel. I think Falcon maybe potentially had a lot more depth to it, as did F-16 Combat Pilot. But what this really reminds me of, and it's not a game that a lot of people talk about, but that's A10 Cuba, which was a PC and Mac game in 1996. And A10 Cuba itself, so obviously it's based on the A10 Warthog, but it itself had that look and feel that was a throwback to things like F-18, had quite an in-depth military campaign in it, but it was so simple to fly, and the aircraft actually felt really nice to handle, even though it's an A-10, which essentially is a flying gun.
Yeah. I would say the look of this really reminds me of a game called Su-27 Flanker in the 90s, which
Su-27 what, sorry?
Flanker, Dave, FL. It kind of bucked the trend, and that is bucked the trend when it came out, in that it didn't go heavy on the textures when every other flight sim was layering textures on everything. This just went, we're going to go high resolution and don't worry about the textures. And so you got this high resolution, really crisp look in the same way you have in Tiny Combat Arena. But that had a really in-depth flight model. You know, the cockpit was all in Russian, and you had to read the manual inside out to learn how to play the thing. And then Flanker 2.5, that's Flanker 2.5, Dave. That layered the textures on top, and then it went off in that direction, which then evolved into DCS Combat. That's where that all came from. That's
is that right?
Lineage.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. DCS is actually fantastic. Yeah, love it.
Yeah.
But the aircraft are too expensive, so I do hope this doesn't go down the DLC route just like DCS. Each aircraft is the same price you drop on an individual game ordinarily, you know, it's crazy.
The absolute worst example of downloadable content in a flight sim was when Microsoft brought out Microsoft Flight. So I don't know if you remember that when that came out. We had Flight Sim 10, and then they brought out Flight, which was by a completely different studio. And instead of getting the whole world, you got one island, a couple of planes, and then you would, I guess they were going to try and sell us the entirety of the world, one island at a time. And yeah, that was the reaction of the whole community. No, just stop this. So it completely died until they went back to basics and came out with the latest flight sim, which was much more like the original. Yeah,
well,
sorry, I jumped in there. Well,
no, that's all right. I was saying that the early versions of Microsoft Flight Sim, they were you got the initial bundle and then you bought the expansion packs. Only they were in big box version rather than DLC. You still had the world though. You had the whole world, but what you bought was a satellite imagery that layered over the top of it. So you could still go places and land places. You could just buy more detail. Yeah. Yeah, fair enough. Yeah. Dave, flight sims?
Not as much as you and Neil, and maybe James, but yeah, I'm quite into them. I played a few in 16-bit times on my Atari ST, and I haven't played them in a very long time. But I liked what I think is a light sim, but I'm not sure it's a light sim. Flight simulators, they need to have combat in them, but I don't want to have all the procedures in there. I want it to be the right balance. So things like F-29 and MiG-29 and Falcon and various other different ones I played. There's one I played that I really got into. I have to admit I didn't pay for it. It was a Pompey Pirates Cracktro on it. And either the manual was on the disc or it was on their next release, and I printed off the big manual on my Star LC10 on tractor paper, and I had the great big manual, which might even be better than the real one. I really got into that. I've tried before to work out which one it is. It might be F-29 Retaliator, but I'm not sure. Whatever it was, you played the role of a fighter bomber, and it was in a fictional combat in the Gulf. Against Russia and so on. So possibly that one. I'm not sure. I need to find some time to look into, find out exactly which one it was. But yeah, I've got quite a few boxed flight sims on my shelves now. And the reason is they're cheap. It's cheap to get them. So when I see them cheap, I buy them.
I'm going to take a stab at F-119 Stealth Fighter. That might have been what you were playing.
F-19, yeah, could be.
Yeah.
It could be.
F-119, 119 Stealth Fighter.
F-119.
No, F-19. Sorry, F-19, not F-119.
Or Stealth
F-19 Stealth.
Yeah.
No, F-19 Stealth Fighter, I think, is that one. Possibly. Could have been something completely different.
F-19, we're going to go head-to-head on different simulators. F-19 had Golf, but you also had Stealth 2, which was the F-117. The Amiga version of F-19 also included the F-117 because they released it slightly late, just as the public got to know what the stealth fighter actually looked like. So they threw the model in at the last minute, which is rather cool.
Right.
F-29 Retaliator also has a golf campaign as well. But yeah, anyway, cool. Not that I've played them all.
I'm just going to mute Chris before we go too far down this rabbit hole there.
I'm glad that between the two of you there, I do want to say that I'm glad that between the two of you there, you've gone absolutely nowhere in answering my question.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, it could have been either. It could have been F-29 Retaliator. It could have been F-19 Stealth Fighter. We've
established that Dave once played a flight sim. And printed off the manual.
Could have been Falcon. Anyway,
as for Microsoft, if they want to get it right properly, then don't try and produce modern AAA games. I've seen quite a few resurrections of old studios, and they just come out with this bland, uninspired, auto-completed game on Unreal or Unity type engines. Don't do that. Focus on good gameplay and make it accessible to people and make it fun. And that seems to be what they're doing here. Maybe it needs a bit more depth to it to be good, but I do like the idea of this.
Yeah, cool. It does look like a lot of fun. But as I did allude to earlier, it's not free. So it is an early access. It's available on Steam.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Free games are not good.
No, free games are not good. But early access, you still have to pay for, and that's $30 Australian or just under $30 Australian, sorry, or just over £15. And it's only got one playable aircraft for your money, and an instant action map and one combat arena map / scenario. And that, to be honest, is the only reason I've not opened my wallet yet. I'd like to see a bit more content, even if I have to pay a little bit more on top to get it. Basically, I really want to see this finish. And while I understand the labour of love concept, I think for something as promising as this and B-52, there comes a point where you just have to trust a team around you, upsize, and get the damn thing finished. So come on, Microprose, kick the tyres and light the fires, please.
Complete it, mate. Ace Gamer Sam started with Super Mario 64 and went through and completed all 296 Nintendo 64 games. And he even streamed it live on Twitch, so I can't even say he's made it up. And it took him just under 6 years to complete. Now, I'm not a Nintendo expert, but I'm led to believe that Nintendo games are of a reasonable quality. I'm sure there's some really great ones, but I'm told there's no real absolute donkeys. They didn't seem to make it out with the kind of shovelware, the rubbish that we ended up with on our 16-bit platforms. Neil's going to come in and tell me, Neil, tell me a bad game.
Superman on the N64. Carmageddon on the N64.
Oh, Carmageddon on the N64.
Bad or just not as good as the PC?
Actually, Unreal Tournament on the N64 was awful as well.
Mm-hmm. Terrible.
Yeah.
But in terms of first-party games, Dave, you're talking about Nintendo first-party games. That there's a huge amount of high quality. It's the other companies that made games for the N64. Yeah.
Well, donkeys. When I said donkeys, I'm thinking of things that we got on Amiga and Atari that were absolute trash. I mean, really absolute trash. Yeah, I don't think quite get that. Anyway, he's managed to get through all of them. And I have dozens or maybe over 100 games that I'd like to sit down and complete. Loads of RPGs and strategy games and a fair number of adventure games. I've never finished Ultima 9, for example, or Full Throttle, or Planescape Torment. I've got Infocom games that I've never even played before, never mind finished. There's at least a dozen SSI games I've not played, and probably a dozen I've not completed. And sometimes I think about them and I really feel I should get them finished. They feel like unfinished business. Neil, do you feel that way about it? Have you got a mental list of games you want to get back to and do? And now that I think about it, I do remember you did actually go back and play one fairly recently, and you were underwhelmed with it, I think.
Yeah, there was a Twitch stream a while back. I think it was Christmas, actually. It was that far back now, where I tried to play through Elvira, the adventure game on the Amiga. A game that I really loved as a kid, but I didn't have walkthroughs. I didn't have access to the internet to help me, or even a Twitch audience telling me what to do next. And actually, what we found as we got deeper and deeper into the game was that it was a complete grind. There was this section in the catacombs where you just had to collect all the regents over and over and over again. And I kind of ruined my fond memories for that game, which was a shame. You mentioned Ultima 9. I bought that on day one when that came out. I don't know if it's even possible today, even with all the patches, to complete that, Dave. You might need to download a saved game that's been hacked to get past bugs or something. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, there are games that I'd like to go back and complete. We're building this arcade museum at the moment, and that's going to open up a whole other world of things. And when you go back and play arcades now, it's kind of weird to have them in free play mode. You have to set a limit for yourself to try and make it a bit more authentic. So, for example, we got Double Dragon recently. I'm not necessarily saying I would like to complete that on 1 credit, but let's say something realistic like 3 credits, like the maximum I might have put in the machine back in the day. I'd love to be able to do that. And no doubt there'll be lots of other arcades. I'm never going to go and challenge myself to beat Ghouls and Ghosts or Ghosts and Goblins. That's what we've got, the first one, because I know how rock hard that is. But yeah, it's nice to set challenges in the modern day when you've got access to every game that's going and unlimited credits on all of these games. It's nice. I think we all probably read Retro Gamer magazine if we're not subscribers, but from time to time. And the first thing I always do when I get Retro Gamer is go to the back page where they've always got the end game sequence of a different game. You can see they picked a game of the month and they show the ending sequence, and it's like, great, I know what happens now. I don't necessarily need to play that. Yeah, there's lots, and I think anyone of a certain age will all tell ourselves that one day we'll be able to complete Jet Set Willy, whether that's going to happen or not.
No chance. Maybe one day I'll go to every single room in a single playthrough.
When I load Jet Set Willy, the version I've got in the cave, it comes up with some cracks at the start, and it says, "Do you want unlimited lives?" And then the next one is, "Do you want enemies?" And you can just turn all the enemies off and just go for a nice walk around the mansion and see everything. So that's quite nice.
It was Jet Set Willy 2 that I had, so that the CPC, I think I mentioned this before, the CPC didn't get Jet Set Willy. It got, when the conversion was done, they added extra rooms to it, maybe because the CPC had more memory available, I'm not sure, or whatever it was. They added extra rooms, and what we got was Jet Set Willy, the Final Frontier. So they added a few extra rooms, but the main one they added was Jet Set Willy in space. So you could fly up into space, and you got into a spacesuit, and they actually did port that back to the original Spectrum, and that's what the Spectrum version of Jet Set Willy 2 is. It's the CPC version of Jet Set Willy. But for me, Jet Set Willy, I just like to go to set myself a goal of getting somewhere, like getting up into space and seeing the rooms there, and that was hard enough for me. For people who don't know Jet Set Willy, perhaps
is there anyone?
Well, I'm thinking anyways from America, because
true.
You can get across there. So if you're watching from America, Jet Set Willy is a fixed jump platformer. So it's one where you start the jump and that's it. You'll land where you land. You can't change it halfway, and those are definitely out of fashion. People hate those, but it made it really difficult. Now, even though I've got a big list, I tend to end up going back to my classics and completing those again and again and again and again, rather than playing new games. So Dungeon Master, Jagged Alliance, XCOM, and I'm wondering if I'm doing myself a disservice by keeping going back to my comfort zone games rather than playing something a bit more difficult, something I don't know so much. And as for modern games, they're so desperately hard to complete. Not only do you have the main game, but they've also got alternative paths, and then DLC with big expansions to make you play the whole thing again, and then achievements and secrets, etc. And I'm in gaming debt, and it keeps getting worse. James, how are you for completing games? Are you a completionist?
Well, I tend to play games that go on for centuries, quite literally. Games like Civilization and Dwarf Fortress and maybe SimCity 2000. Yeah, love it. I just love playing those kind of RTS games that are super in-depth and go on forever and ever and ever. Because I travel loads, so it makes an 18-hour flight to Sydney really goes like that if you're playing Civilization. Like, it's so good. Just get the laptop up and go for it. I've completed all the Deus Ex games. I love those because obviously the Cyberpunk connection, even though I can't quite handle Adam Jensen's voice, but I do like those types of games. And I recently completed Skies of Arcadia. That was good. But yeah, other than that, I'm kind of more into the let's see if this can go on forever. Get the best spaceship in Frontier Elite 2, that kind of thing. You know, it's very much a yeah, exactly. That's the one. That's the one with a mining laser on the front, just taking out ships in like just
lasers everywhere. You got 4 turrets on that thing. Yeah,
so cool. Yeah, that's kind of me in a nutshell, really. Yeah.
Yeah, well, actually, before I jump into the ones I'd like to complete, I just fact-checked myself. As soon as I said Unreal Tournament was a bad game on the N64, I thought, no, wait a minute, I think that was the PS2. And sure enough, it was. It never actually came out on the N64. I'm wrong yet again, but it's okay. I think I beat the internet comments for once. But anyway. But yeah, completing games. I wish I had the time I had as a teenager. You know, completing games was easy. You just ignored the mountain of homework and assignments and got on with the important things in life, like completing games. Or getting to the next base on Captive would have been one of my favourite things to do. Yes, rather than doing my homework. And that, to be honest, is top of my list of games I need to revisit. Captive. I need to finish the first 10 bases, Dave. I never actually,
Brilliant.
I never
It's
got
a
that
brilliant
first
game. It's such a good
liberation
game.
experience. Yeah, it's an awesome game. It's an awesome game. Other ones, a Myriad Sphinx adventure on the Acorn Electron is one I think I've mentioned a couple of times before. It's just a text adventure, but it's one of the first games I ever played, and I never got very far. I just got lost in the forest at the beginning and then got killed by a dwarf. I need to finish that game at some point to stop the nightmares. X-Wing, I never actually got the Battle of Yavin unlocked as a historic mission. I never got that far. I need to destroy the Death Star in X-Wing.
Yeah,
I know.
That's the whole point of the game.
Exactly. Well, what most people did was they just bought the expansion packs, which automatically unlocked that battle anyway. So you could do it that way. But Mercenary, but the second city. So I completed, the green version as Mercenary, as they would call it. And I know Neil's keen on Mercenary. Did you do the second city, Neil?
I haven't completed the second city. I used to like just getting lost in Mercenary and exploring it, because I've since learned if you go on the internet and look up a walkthrough, it's one of those ones that you can complete in like 5 minutes if you follow the exact steps to complete the game.
Right.
So,
months.
be careful. Be careful you don't ruin it for yourself by looking up a walkthrough in that style. Yeah.
Well, doing the first city, or the green planet, as I would call it. I mean, I remember mapping on grid paper for months, what felt like months, to finish that game. It was such a good experience. But I know once I've done second city, that will lead me on to going into Damocles, which I've never played at all. So I'm looking forward to that. Shadow the Beast. Everybody says it's a tech demo. It's a game. There is an end. I'm convinced it's doable without a cheat. But again, if I do number 1, then I've got to do number 2 and number 3. Otherwise, I'm a complete failure in life. And that's about it. There are many others, but those are the ones that spring to mind, Dave.
So, on the subject of Mercenary, I bought that last week. I bought the Amiga version of Mercenary and Second City last week, so it's now on the shelf. I don't know if you can see it. Anyway, Damocles is the one I played, though, on my ST. Damocles is fantastic, but I haven't played the original Mercenary, so I will play that. But I did go back to Damocles recently, and it feels really lonely. It's like you're exploring a world that all the NPCs have been removed from.
It's so true.
It's a bit strange. Shadow of the Beast, I watched a Twitch streamer who was trying to do that, just repeatedly playing it, and he got really good at it. And he thinks he can complete it if he keeps trying. I didn't watch it for long enough to find out. But Shadow of the Beast would be good if someone went back and hacked it and changed the hitboxes on it. If you change the hitboxes in Shadow of the Beast, I reckon it would change into a good game. It's just so difficult.
Is that what they did on the Mega Drive version? People say the Mega Drive version kind of cleaned it up, but I've never played it.
I don't know. We need to ask.
If you want to play a very different version that's quite enjoyable, the PC Engine CD-ROM version, it's a completely different game and very nice. You can get quite far in it. Well, I can. Further than the Amiga version, yeah. But there you go. Dave, was playing Mercenary lonelier than a dinosaur in space?
Well, that's the theme for this, isn't it? The theme for this show is depressing thoughts, things to make you unhappy. So I'm very sorry about that. That's not an intention.
No.
But yeah, no, Damocles is strange that way. I never felt that way when I played it in my ST originally, but now going back to it, it's like an open world game with all the NPCs removed. It's strange. Same kind of graphics as what we're talking about before Fell Polygons. Anyway, so if you wanted a reason to feel bad at your backlog, this guy has given you one. Completed all the games, all the N64 games, one by one, just gone through them, rather than done what we do, go back to the same ones again.
I wonder if you'll ever pick up an N64 again.
Maybe that's second him of it. Maybe it's ruined at the N64 for him forever.
Is he like the only person on Earth with 3 hands, maybe, so he can actually use the controller?
Time now for our community question of the week. And last week we were talking about the war on retro. We were talking about how a Japanese minister wants to end any reliance on old tech with the humble floppy disk firmly in his sights. So the question was, what retro tech would you declare war on? Anything at all that you want to see disappear and why? And we've had some fantastic answers. We've had 499 people have come to look at the question of the week this week. That's a good turnout. Lots of answers. So I will go with the top rated one. I'll read out the first one. It's from Generation Pixel, and it says, I'm an angry old man, and that just might describe the majority of our listeners, mightn't it? Angry old man.
He's actually quite young compared to some of us. I know who Generation Pixel is. He's younger than some of us. Yeah, well, it appears to be anyway.
Okay. I'm an angry old man, and you want just one thing to declare war on. Well, you're getting two, and that's my final compromise. Okay. Number one, people who say there was a video game crash in '83. No, there blooming wasn't. There was a minor blip in North America. Europe and Japan were seeing an explosion in both hardware and software.
There you go.
I agree. So you can have your second point.
Yeah.
Point two. People who call vintage hardware and software retro. The NES Classic Mini, PlayStation Classic, and A500 are retro. Original machines, cassette tapes, floppy disks, and CD-ROMs are vintage. Well, this is a topic that we've discussed in the show before. We did come to the same conclusion with an understanding that, look, we understand what you mean when you use these words. It's fine. And he finishes with, right, rant done. I'm away for a wee cup of tea and a sit down to calm myself.
I'm really with him in point one. Really am. I cringe when I hear the video game crash in '83. It
didn't exist.
Oh, no. But point two, I don't care. Just don't care.
That's because you're vintage.
So long as you are understood, that's fine. James, would you like to read out answer number 2, which is from Pajako6502?
With pleasure. I declare war on Playground Wars on which system was better. Under the aging and yellowed plastic hoods, you can say that one chip is better than another and that the clock speed or bus width matters. But in this day and age, with modern homebrew coders pumping out some games for old systems that literally would have had us soiling ourselves in disbelief back then, I have come to realize it genuinely isn't about what it is, but about how it's used. However, as the new ruler of the universe, I give special permission to Dave and Chris to carry on ribbing each other about the ST versus Amiga because it is downright funny and never fails to bring a smile to my face.
And the Amiga's the best.
I like that one a lot.
I'm glad that people see my weekly destruction of the Amiga as
fun. And there's two of us, Neil.
There really isn't.
Come on, back me up.
There really isn't an argument.
Somebody has to adjudicate this, and I do agree with that line. It's not what it is; it's how you use it.
100%.
And I think a lot of ST owners get told that. Let's move on to question 3. Answer 3. Dave, would you like to read answer 3? I think it's from your good friend Richard Shears.
I see the name Richard Shears and I already know I will agree with him. I would like to declare war on gatekeepers telling you how you should enjoy your retro pleasure. You tell it like it is, Rich.
Yes.
Hang on.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Don't let someone...
Is that retro pleasure or vintage pleasure?
I've entered the wrong webcam room. Sorry.
Touche.
Sorry,
Don't let someone else dictate how you should. If you enjoy software emulation, hardware emulation, or original hardware, do so. If you want to use your GoTech, go for it. However, you relax and enjoy the simpler times is great. Don't let others spoil it. Well said, Rich. Rich is a genius. He's always brilliant. He's always nice. So yeah, I agree with him. I don't like the gatekeeping. Sometimes I'll catch myself doing it and I'll correct myself, like last week when I told myself to wind my neck in because I realized, hang on, Dave, you're projecting what you want onto other people. It's not right to do that.
Rich sounds like the kind of guy that would send a man a dinosaur for his birthday.
It is,
yeah. Or play a game that no one else has.
He went up into space first to get that dinosaur. That's how dedicated he is.
Yes.
But yeah, I think that could be the mission statement for our whole show, really, isn't it? However you want to enjoy retro, that's entirely up to you, so long as you're enjoying it. And if you're enjoying it, then you're doing it right. And if you're not enjoying it, then you're doing something wrong. Adjust and enjoy it. And actually, we've all made adjustments, I think, throughout our hobby, whether it be going on a massive mute click on social media to say, I don't want to see all that negativity. I just want all the positive things, whether it be getting a GoTech, whether it be whatever, whether it be using an online service like AntStream, whatever works for you, works for you. It's all good. So there you go. Great answers, everyone. And there's a whole lot more in there. Chris, you wanted to put your hand up?
Just very quickly, I am aware that I did not thank Protec438 for sharing the Tiny Combat Arena story. So, yeah, thank you.
There we go.
And I've got something else we should point as well as a correction.
Okay, we're into the any other business section of the show.
Do not
go ahead,
talk about the theremin.
Oh.
I do not have a correction.
In my defense, it was easy to confuse. It was easy to assume Star Trek. You don't upset Trekkies, and it was easy to assume the Star Trek theme tune was done with the theremin because they both sound like strangled cats. So I am really sorry.
Oh gosh. Okay, we'll wait. We'll wait for those comments in this week's show and issue
Chris
an apology.
Was the person that talked about strangling cats and Star Trek.
Yeah. So that was Chris.
There was no theremin in Star Wars.
Towards Chris. Okay. Time for a new question of the week then for this week. As always, you can contribute stories for the show at reddit.com/r/thisweekinretro. We will pick and choose stories that we think will be good for a discussion and conversation on the show. Not necessarily the one that's upvoted the most, just ones that stand out for us. So if you want to go and submit your story, head over to the subreddit. And you'll also see the latest show and the question of the week pinned in the subreddit. And the next question of the week is as follows. It's kind of a quiz. We're setting you a challenge and we'll try and answer. Others can try and answer as well next week. So the question is, can you describe a famous game? Well, it doesn't even have to be a famous game. Can you describe a game that you like in the way that you might tell an AI system to create it? So, for example, if I were to type angry race driver in city smashes up opponents with no regard for pedestrians, and it's hyper gory, then the answer would be Carmageddon. So make it as cryptic as you like. And I think one of us next week can be the quiz master. They can go and get the answers. So the question, so we don't see how other people have responded.
Oh, I get you.
Yeah.
Good idea.
Yeah,
and we'll try and guess for ourselves. So
fantastic.
describe your game as you would to an AI, and we'll see if we can do it. And we could even paste the top 3 answers into an AI image generator and see what it comes up with, shall we?
Nice.
We'll give that a go. James, thank you again for joining us, James. It's been great to have your company. Just remind us again where we need to go to find out more about your retro cyberpunk city building board game that you're working on.
Just head to Kickstarter. It's live right now. Type in Civitas, Civitas 2230, and it'll come straight up, and it's right there, and you can go for it. I've been playing the video in the background there. Always promoting.
It's got the t-shirt on as well.
Always promoting.
And the mug. He's got it on. Yeah, great.
Yeah,
so go and search for that.
Behind. Thank you.
Perfect. Go and search for that, or just click on the link in the show notes that Duncan will kindly put there. And if it takes your fancy, back it. And I know you play tested it in the cave, but maybe if we can get you over that line and you fund it, maybe we can have a launch event or something like that.
Oh,
and,
the dream.
A big gaming session at the cave. That would be great.
Oh, that'd be super fun. Yeah, super fun.
It's on track. I mean, it looks on track. It's got 3 weeks left and it's halfway there. So by the time this comes out, it'll have almost 2 weeks left.
Nice.
So
that's all the old backers that have played the previous games. So we're now in the realms of new people that have never heard of it before.
You're in that kind of period in the Kickstarter where it doesn't tend to move very much. It moves at the start and moves at the end, and then there's this anxious part in the middle where, please.
No.
It's so funny. This is the only part of a Kickstarter where my partner's actually interested. She's like, "Oh, he's just gonna." I'm like, I've spent like the last 3 years making this game. You're like, literally, are you working again tonight? I'm like, yes. And then she's like, you better get on with this, James. Like, can you do something to make something happen? I'm like, honestly,
Wow. On that bombshell. Thank you again, James, Chris, and Dave. Thank you for joining us. Happy birthday again to Dave. Direct your theremin comments to Chris. Direct your happy birthdays to Dave. Check out James's Kickstarter, and we'll see you next week. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
That was really fun.
This Week in Retro was presented by Neil from RMC The Cave, Chris from 005 AGIMA, and Dave. It was produced by me, Duncan Styles. The podcast version of the show is available through your favourite podcaster, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and the video version is available on the This Week in Retro YouTube channel.
Join our community subreddit at r/thisweekinretro to suggest and vote on the stories we cover on the show. If you watch This Week in Retro on YouTube, please give us a like and subscribe to help us reach new viewers.
If you enjoy our show and would like to support it, then please check out the link to our Patreon page in the show notes or description. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time for more up-to-date news for out-of-date tech.